we're now in Halesworth, where the Foundry is, and this is where I come in the afternoons. This is where my work's developed and cast, and a number of projects are on the go at the moment. The big one is this 26-foot high figure, which is being made for a site on the A12 here, near here in Suffolk, and they're creating a landscape and a lake for it. And there'll be the spoil of the lake will create this hill, and on this hill will stand this man looking down into the lake. He's made in plaster at the moment, and he's based on one of my Crete men, the men that are on the marshes. Well, first of all, I made this. This was a maquette. This is what I showed the client. And then I made it a metre high in order to be able to scale it up. And then what happens is that sculpture was carefully aligned on a big board and then placed on the bandsaw deck, and it was bandsawed up into slices. Each one of these slices came free like a little beer mat, little template, and was numbered, and then we traced around on graph paper, we traced around each shape, okay? So we end up with a grid which is scaled to the size of an 8x4 sheet of polystyrene, and then they're transferred to the working surface of the polystyrene, and with felt tip pens people copy in each square the shapes and end up getting large templates in polystyrene, which are then cut out with a jigsaw, and we have then this whole studio full of about 200 templates in polystyrene. They are then reconstructed, reconfigured in sequence, foot first obviously. Little cuts are made in the sides of them so they can slide around a steel frame which is welded to the building. So there's like a big steel tuning fork coming down to the floor, bolted to the floor and to the ceiling. And then each foot, each template is cut out so it can slide on around the steel, slice put back in, hole in the middle is filled with plaster and scrim, and it's plastered in. The next layer comes in, plastered in. The next layer, all the way up the shin, the knee, the thigh, the body, the head, and everything. Once we've rebuilt that, we have a polystyrene Michelin man with all like a strata all going up. Then the guys get this figure out again and carefully in the polystyrene with various tools, rasps and wire brushes and all that sort of stuff, remodel all my marks all over the figure. Once they'd made my thumb marks a metre high, they covered it in scrim and plaster like a jute netting. And so I had a plastered figure ready for me to resurface and work on. Buckets and buckets and buckets of material were being passed up the lift, and I was slapping on all this material, like making big investments. And I had saws and shovels and sticks and stuff, and I was just throwing it into the sculpture. And then eventually I was getting to the point where I was beginning to rasp and sand and chisel and refine this figure, having to go up, make 2 marks, get down, go across the room, look at it, go back up, and go down, zigzagging all the way around this thing for months and months and months to try and make sense of this figure on this scale. So it was an incredible period of creativity, and to get the gaze of the figure right, to get the profiles of the head, to get it all working in scale and proportion, get the sight lines right, get the profiles, all that sort of stuff working, and get the idea impregnated into this figure to make it make sense of itself. So you can see here one of those panels, one of those moulds from the big Colossus is set out, and wax has been painted into the mould surface, 3 different colours. So we needed about 1/4 of an inch thick and you need an even thickness. So you'll see like a licorice all sort, 3 shades, yellow, green and blue. And they're painted on 3 layers, and then we know we've got a good thickness of wax at about 1/4 of an inch. And then these are the runners and risers. So the wax is going to be pulled out of this mould once a core is put in the back. And these tubes, they look like wax and solid, but we always think in the negative because they're going to be burnt out, are all going to be covered in plaster and grog. And they'll all lead to a cup at the top. And these smaller ones are the vents which let the air out. So it's like a central heating system in a house. Bronze pours in, shoots down these runners, and then the air is pulled out of this there, and it all comes at the top of the mould, and the bronze will slowly fill up the vacant spaces it will be then in the mould. And then we smash out the bronzes out of the moulds, and then we try and reconstitute all the moulds in this stuff, which is called luto, Italian word, for crushed moulds. So this stuff is then used again to make the moulds again, so we completely rebalance and rebuild and recycle every time. And on the shelves here, you'll see all the sections that have been cast so far, from the feet up to the crotch. So this has all got to be welded together, and the figure's got to be created. The figure will be made in 3 sections in the studio, and the door's too big, too small for this figure to go out, so we've got to move it outside with cranes once the 3 sections have been welded together, and all the armatures have been placed inside them, stainless steel armature about that thick. There's going to be a 6-metre set of piles going underground, so it's probably the same amount again underground. So suddenly then it starts to make sense. You think, actually, God, if there's that much underground, he's not going to move much. We built this kiln, and inside at the moment, moulds are cooking. They're going to be in it for 7 days. We're pouring next Friday. So inside here are a load of sculptures from the Saxmundham studio. This is burning at 500 degrees for 7 days. So they'll be pulled out on a railway track. You can see the tracking shadow of it there, which is there. They come out, lovely and warm, isn't it? And then they're all strapped. So in there is about 4 new sculptures, all individual ones. This is the bronze ingot. This is how it comes to me. So I buy this by the ton and melt it very quickly, and it goes far too fast in my life. It's probably the most expensive part of my life. We put about 20 of these into this crucible, and it shockingly takes a hell of a lot of bronze, 1/4 of a ton at a time. So we have a crane that lowers this thing into this furnace. The flame issues around this furnace, gets up to a temperature of about 1100-1200 degrees. It takes a day to melt down about 4 or 5 of these. You saw us in the kiln. Those moulds are coming out. They're going to be made lined, mould lines down here in a very noisy atmosphere, hot. There'll be guys strapping those, making them strong with plaster and scrim. They'll be laid out, and we'll pour the bronze into those moulds, having the wax be melted out, the wood be melted out, they've been blown out, cleaned out, etc. It's a very important day, and I think, my people, we have reached the end of the tour.